Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We'll give it a few minutes just for everyone to join. Okay, I guess we can now start. Good afternoon. We are pleased to have you with us as we explore the key findings and recommendations from Mercy Corps' recent Water Policy Review and Research Assessment conducted in close partnership with the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, a national assessment that examines the factors shaping Jordan's pathway towards a more climate resilient and water secure future. This analysis provides a comprehensive review of Jordan's water governance system, examining the policy frameworks, institutional roles, and decision-making processes that shape the sector. It assesses how responsibilities are distributed across national and local institutions, and how these arrangements influence implementation at the community level in areas such as Azraq, Diban, and Wadi Musa. It also identifies the structural pressures facing the sector, including limited water availability, aging infrastructure, high water losses, and fragmentation across mandates, while highlighting opportunities to strengthen coherence, transparency, and climate-resilient water management across the kingdom. My name is Yasmin Khair, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Over the next hour, we'll walk you through the insight generated through this analysis, highlighting the governance gaps, opportunities for reform, and the practical pathways identified to strengthen water security and climate resilience in Jordan. After the presentation, we'll open the floor for a 40-minute Q&A session, so please feel free to send your questions at any time. You can either send them in the chat box or through the Q&A box. Before we begin, a couple of notes. Oh, sorry. Our speakers for today are Elisa Savelli, the Regional Water and Climate Advisor, and Noor Derwaze, the Policy Research and Evidence Specialist from Mercy Corps. They will discuss Mercy Corps Jordan's response to the assessment findings and share how our ongoing programming is helping translate evidence into action on the ground. Before we begin, a couple of quick notes. This session is being recorded and will be shared with you afterwards. Please introduce yourself in the chat box. We would love to know where you're joining us from. With that, I'll hand it over to Noor to get started.
Thank you, Yasmin. Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for joining our webinar here today. We're very excited to share all of the findings that we've been working for the past 9 months on this study. To start off, I'd like to inform you a little bit more about our programming, our project Tabeaa, Strengthening Climate Resilience in Jordanian Communities project. which throughout we have established this water policy analysis. To start with, Tabeaa is obviously being implemented by Mercy Corps. Mercy Corps is a non-governmental organization that works together in the front lines of crisis, disaster, and poverty, hoping to create a world where everyone can prosper. Specifically in Jordan, and which is aligned with our core values of Tabeaa, we strive to build strong, cohesive communities by promoting resilience, inclusivity, and economic independence. We mostly focus on cross-cutting issues such as ensuring that everyone is being equally represented within our programming with regards to youth, ensuring gender equality and good governance, as well as natural resource management. For the Tabeaa project, it is currently co-funded by the Ziz Yurich Foundation as well as the SDC. The project works within the Zurich Climate Resilience Alliance, which is a group of different organizations that work together to ensure that communities are resilient to climate hazards, thus enabling them to thrive. More about the Tabeaa project, which is a 4-year project that was inceptionalized in 2024. We are currently in the implementation phase of this project, and we will continue to implement our interventions until 2027, where we'll be closing out and finalizing our interventions by then. The project works in 3 governorates in Jordan with 5 main communities. So we work in Tabeaa. In Tabeaa, we work within the Azraq community, focusing on their vulnerability to flash floods as well as heat waves. And then we work in Ma'an, where we target 2 communities. In Wadi Musa, we focus on flash floods, and in Shobak, we focus on flash floods and heat waves. We finally work in Madaba, Leh and Biban, where we're focused on flash floods and heat waves in both communities as well. The main overarching goal for the 4 years of this project is to ensure that vulnerable communities in Jordan have increased resilience to climate change, more specifically climate-related hazards such as I had previously mentioned, flash floods and heat waves. Next, please. So the Tabeaa's project or approach to building resilience is based on 3 tiers. So this pathway allows us to transition and translate local evidence to national action and investment. We first work on building climate resilience at the local level within the communities that we work, and then we work on localizing advocacy and influencing and highlighting these pathways to ensure national uptake and operationalization of local needs and local community voices. And then finally, we work on innovation, partnerships, and investment. To start things off and to dive a little bit more into the areas in which we work, on building climate resilience, we work on different levels. So as I previously mentioned, we work on local level initiatives. First off, we leverage the CRMC tool, which is the Community Resilience Measurement for Communities tool. This assessment has allowed us to capture different data from all of the communities in which we work to better understand their needs. So to explain a little bit more about the framework was developed by the Alliance to measure community resilience to climate resilience hazards. So for Jordan's case, we're focusing on flash floods and heat waves. And then what the framework allows us to do is to combine conceptual framework of the CRMC with a practical tool that allows us to capture this evidence and then translate it into actual gaps that we can prioritize and address throughout our programming. The highlight of this tool is that it puts the community engagement at its core, whereby the communities are engaged in every single stage of the process. So we start by identifying their needs through data collection within the specific communities in which we work, and then we leverage their input to prioritize the actions that are needed to address these gaps and or translate and/or target their needs. And then finally, we design interventions alongside these communities to be able to address these gaps. The impact that's generated from the CRMC is very measurable, so that we are able to generate evidence on what defines resilience, and then really capture evidence on how this is being translated on the ground and within the communities in which we work. And finally, it strengthens social, political, and financial investment in climate resilience. So basically, the CRMC framework is at the core of all of our programming, in that it has helped us develop and establish the foundation for our work to come, and is a cross-cutting approach to everything that we do within the entire project. So through these, first we start by identifying these needs and designing the interventions, and then we ensure that the community is aware and engaged in all of the activities that we're doing, on better understanding what gaps lie within their communities. Based on these gaps and the prioritization and the feedback from the community, we're able to design and implement resilience interventions that specifically target these gaps that we're identifying, ensuring that they are responsive to the specific communities in which we work. Finally, this framework and this approach to work allows us to ensure local ownership of any ideas that are being implemented, cross-cutting learning, and that action is actually being taken with regards to the evidence that we're generating. Next slide, please. So the second thematic area in which we work on is localized advocacy and influencing. So we work both on the policy and the systems level, as well as the local community level. We try to ensure that national policy is being operationalized within all of the governorates in Jordan. We try to ensure that policy localization is being localized based on community needs and is being implemented. This is being done by strengthening disaster risk management units at the municipal level. So basically what we have been doing is mapping out all of the policies, all of the strategies that have been developed on the national level, and trying to find ways that we can work with local actors such as the municipalities and the different communities that we work, to ensure that all of these higher level policies are actually being translated into local plans and are actually being operationalized. We also try to empower communities to ensure that their voices are heard within the policy landscape. So this is being done through the community-led advocacy, in which we have created local advocacy committees in the different areas in which we're working. These committees are representatives of the actual community, such as activists, youth, women, etc. And then we have also encouraged government officials to take part of these committees, so that we can form groups that are capable and able to advocate for the needs that are being reflected and or being voiced at the local level, and then trying to transmit that to national decision makers. So at the core, we try to ensure that everything is, all of the policy work that we're doing is evidence-based, such as this water policy analysis that we have been working on. Finally, we try to enhance coordination through the water hazards working group that we have established throughout the project to ensure that all of the actors working within the climate change and disaster risk reduction sector are grouped in a place where we can talk, discuss about progress, updates, what we're working on, to ensure that there is no duplication of effort whatsoever with regards to programming and efforts on the ground. Next slide, please. So all in all, just to summarize the advocacy work that we do, we try to reflect a top-down, bottom-up approach as much as possible, ensuring that system-level change and national-level policy influence are connected to community voices and local-level evidence and realities, to ensure that communities' voices inform national strategy, and that also national policies are adapted to local contexts, with a continuous feedback loop between both. Next slide, please. Finally, since climate change obviously is multifaceted, we have approached our programming through multiple lenses. And the third lens is enabling climate smart action through innovation, partnerships, and investment, which we believe is the best way kind of to close this circle of programming, by ensuring that climate smart climate smart solutions are and innovations are being incentivized, that private sector engagement and partnerships are being established to ensure that not only are we working with local communities, but we're also engaging the private sector to ensure some sort of sustainability and really encourage them to invest more in climate smart solutions. We also, through our program, will be providing seed funding for scalable solutions and then hoping to influence other actors to approach climate smart solutions in the same way. And then finally, we will be funding the Tabeaa platform, which is a platform that has been supported by Mercy Corps for a while now. What the Tahammul platform does is that it maps out all of the climate change programming that has been done or is being currently implemented to be able to showcase all of the efforts that are being on the ground, allowing decision makers and or implementing partners to see what's out there to avoid duplicating efforts and encouraging collaboration to support different initiatives, scale up on other initiatives, and so on. Next slide, please. Cross-cutting areas, and this has been pretty evident throughout the tell of all of the activities that I've been going through. But basically, at the core of everything that we do, we try to ensure that everything is evidence-based and that we generate research and continuously publish and or share this knowledge with different actors within the same sector. We try to ensure that all of the work utilizes strategic media and advocacy as a core component as well. We try to, throughout our activities, ensure that we are capacitating and we're raising awareness of the different work that we're doing, and especially with regards to the issue of climate change. And then finally, we try to foster as many stakeholder engagements and partnerships throughout our activities. Also, I just want to, before we go on to this next segment of the water governance policy analysis and showcase all of the findings that we came up with as well as recommendations, I just want to backtrack for last year in 2024 when we conducted a national policy analysis on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. We then also conducted a webinar and showcased all of the findings that came out of that analysis. Throughout that, we looked at how policies intersect across different sectors, including water. But since water security is becoming one of Jordan's most urgent climate challenges and a major driver of community vulnerability, Tabeaa decided, based on the findings and analysis that was conducted in 2024, to take a closer look at water-related policies and governance structures. The idea is that this deeper assessment will help us ensure that our programming pays greater attention to water issues, which sit at the heart of climate resilience. It also directly supports our broader objective of evidence-based influence, what we've been talking about throughout this segment, by identifying the governance gaps that limit effective water management. The analysis gives us concrete evidence to bring into national policy conversations at the end of the road. And importantly, it strengthens the localization of national climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction strategies. We're hoping that the findings will help municipalities understand how high-level water policies can translate into practical actions on the ground, from improving water management to integrating climate risks into local development plans. And now handing it over to Yasmin to take us through to the next segment.
Thank you, Noor. I will hand it over to Elisa, who will walk us through the key findings and recommendations from the water policy analysis.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you, Noor, and everyone who has joined us today. And as we transition at the heart of our study, we will take a closer look at what is driving Jordan water governance crisis and what needs to change. So Jordan indeed faces one of the most severe water crises in the world, with less than 61 cubic meter of renewable water available per person per day, which is way below the absolute scarcity thresholds. And this crisis is compounded by the climate impact, but also by rapid economic development, or at least economic development, and growing refugee population, some say. Municipal water losses also exceed about 50%. And as a result of these compounding issues, key aquifer, just like the Hazrak, the Dizi, are being overexploited and becoming increasingly cyanized. So in this context, in a country that is this water insecure, water governance, we believe water governance is essential because it ensures that all actors across sector, across level, are aligned, coordinated, and work together towards the shared solution. So this study was initiated to understand whether water governance in Jordan is ready to face such a crisis. The idea was to move beyond the diagnosis and to provide concrete governance solution, concrete but also politically feasible. And overall, this study aimed to help Jordan community bridge this gap between the national water policy ambition and the local reality by understanding how water governance work across the national, the municipal, community level. So basically, we wanted to understand where do policy falter, where institution overlaps and community end up being left out. The study examined water policies and the legal framework at the national level, but also dives deeper into the local level to understand how these policies are implemented within the community, implemented or not. We will see. So to do that, we structured our assessment across, let's say, 3 interconnected levels. The first, we focus on the legal and policy framework that govern water in Jordan. So basically, what laws, what strategy do exist, what policy do exist. Second, we investigated the institutional arrangement, meaning the who does what, where do mandates overlap, and where are the accountability gaps. Third, we looked at basically at how this policy and structure play out on the ground through community engagement or local implementation and actual service delivery. So we examined the challenge that continue to affect community despite the presence of a legal and policy framework. So we try to understand basically whether there were issues like intermittent water supply or lack of participation in decision making. And to understand how water governance work in practice, we applied a structured multi-dimensional framework. So you can see that each of these 3 focus areas, the legal and policy framework, the institutional arrangement, the policy implementation and community engagement, was assessed using 4 core criteria: effectiveness, coherence, appropriateness, inclusion. And basically, to build this approach, we drew on the OECD principle of water governance and also the UNDP Seaway water governance framework. And why was this analytical framework important for us? Because it's basically reflect that water challenges aren't just technical, but also institutional, political, and social. And we needed a framework that could measure not just how well policies are designed, but also how fairly they are implemented, who they benefit, and whether they align also across the sector and the needs. So to bring this framework to life, let's say, we used a mixed method approach that combined policy review with very deep local insight. This was essential to bridge this, as I was saying before, to bridge the gap between what's written on paper and what's happening on the ground. First, we conducted a comprehensive literature review of all the existing water laws. Yes, it was quite long, policy, strategy, and climate commitment. Then we held more than 20 key informed interview with government, ministry, municipality, utility, or civil society organization. Third, we organized focus group discussion with farmers in the specific area in the Azraq, Diban, and Wadi Musa to understand their current living experience and how they, which water challenges do they face and how they navigate them. And finally, we conducted a national level community surveys about we survey about 162 respondents across these three municipal areas. So now let's delve into the key funding and more specifically, the legal and policy framework itself. As we reflect on the legal and policy foundation for water governance in Jordan, there are three important strengths that stand out as they form a solid base to build from. First, Jordan has developed an extensive, I would say, at least relative to the rest of the region, an evolving legislative framework, which is mostly anchored in the water authority laws and significantly reinforced by the recent national water strategy. So this recent strategy signal a clear long-term commitment to managing scarcity by reducing no revenue water, but also to signal a commitment, to adapting to climate realities. Second, another important strength I would like to mention is an institutional clarity, is a strong institutional clarity whereby the Ministry of Water and Irrigation is the authority that sets unified national policy direction, where the Water Authority of Jordan and the Jordan Valley Authority have clearly defined role in either municipal water services and respectively municipal water services and irrigation planning. So another, and then to move on, the third strength is that characterize Jordan policy and legal landscape is that these now increasingly reflect the complexity of the country water crisis because, for instance, they openly acknowledge the pressure of climate change or risk like groundwater depletion, flooding, which were once more peripheral, and they are now integrated into this national strategy. Yes, and at the same time, what's promising is that Jordan's strategic focus on infrastructure efficiency and system modernization. The government has prioritized investment in I would say large-scale wastewater reuse, rainwater harvesting, and we could mention as well that a central pillar of this strategy is the fight against no revenue water. No revenue water for non-expert is the water that is lost through leaks, theft, or poor metering. It's not accounted for. And the national water strategy set an ambitious target of reducing no revenue water by to below 25%. And as you have heard before, now we have 50 or plus no revenue water level. Ultimately, Jordan has also recently embarked on a cautious but deliberate pathway toward economic and market-based reform. There was the 2001 amendment of the Water Authority law that basically laid the groundwork for public-private partnership, for corporatization of utility, for performance-based contract. And there are also reforms around tariff, tiered pricing, utility efficiency that are now cautiously introduced, and they aim to improve cost recovery hopefully still protecting the vulnerable household. So, to move on, while Jordan Water Governance Framework shows strengths on paper, the real test seems lies in turning this strategy into action. And this is where critical gaps persist. So there is first, basically the most general findings of our study. What's quite what is clear is that there is a gap between the vision and the implementation. As a disclaimer, not all of the policy we analyzed, some of the policy we are analyzed were quite recent, about 2 years or less old, and therefore the situation might change. But as of now, there is this gap. And while, for instance, the national strategy reflects a growing climate awareness, this does not consistently translate into something like risk-informed planning or adaptive investment. And or, for instance, groundwater control remains quite patchy and flood preparedness is quite under development. These are just examples of that exemplify basically this gap, what we define as a gap. Even so, basically, many reforms remain conceptual, and in practice, they are rarely institutionalized, funded, or enforced. So the second challenge relates instead to the centralization of to the institutional framework, which is highly centralized. This is not problematic per se, but it's problematic when it affects the operation of, for instance, municipality or other organizations like water user association, because their role as of now is only an advisory role, which is limited, so and with no decision-making power, with no fiscal autonomy. So these organizations, municipality, water user association, and so on, they are rarely involved in policy design or resource allocation, despite, and here I would highlight this, because it's an important point, despite these organizations are the ones that are closely related to the community they serve and they have to protect. So municipalities are often left to manage critical water or flood-related challenges, but they have a clear mandate, they don't have the budget, and they have to often improvise. While water user associations have a lot of potential, but also for them, they lack a legal status and I would say an operational independence. So another challenge relates also to the institutional fragmentation, and what we mean is that and I'll give you an example to highlight what do we mean with that. So the Water Authority of Jordan, for instance, the Jordan Valley Authority, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Environment, they operate in parallel system, but they sometimes their mandate intersect they interact, they overlap, and this sometimes can entail duplicating effort, delaying intervention, and also higher cost, so less efficiency or effectiveness. Next, one more related to a technical water security aspect relates to the governance, to the policy on groundwater governance, which is, I would say, one of the most pressing governance failures that we, and because it's one of the most difficult to tackle. So the law exists, is a law that aims to cap groundwater abstraction, to regulate well usage. However, enforcement is inconsistent and not always effective. So most well are not equipped with meters, nor telemetry. And this make real-time monitoring almost impossible, as you might understand. Also, sometimes the difficulties in enforcing this groundwater oversight or control is due to a lack of coordination between the authorities, the water authorities, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the local authorities, because this lack of coordination create blind spots, but also lack of shared data. So basically, groundwater depletion can continue unchecked. But what's more, at least from my perspective, is that the enforcement of this groundwater policy is quite unequal. So you might find influential landowners, large-scale users that often retain outdated or excessive abstraction license, what we call the legacy well license. But on the other side, smallholder and more, community members, other community members struggle to comply or to access to water. So it says if there is a selective enforcement and together with the weak monitoring, these systems gives the advantaged user a privileged access, while the smallholder farmers, the low-income community face the brunt of the shortage and unreliable supply, poor quality. So this is not, I'm mentioning this because I believe that this is not just unfair or destabilizing, but it's also unsustainable because the inequity erode the public trust in the water institution. It can fuel social tension, but inequity can also enable the overconsumption of the privileged elite, accelerating, therefore, the depletion of the already scarce resources. Next, another challenge we identified is the fact that the Jordan Water Governance Framework seems to pay very little attention to ecosystem, but also environmental flows. So if we look at the current laws, the current policies, they seem to largely omit an explicit provision for allocating water to sustain the ecosystem and despite they have a critical role in recharging the groundwater, in ensuring biodiversity and climate resilience. Also, influencing the ecosystem and the environmental flow is the pollution. And an aspect that is also related to governance is the fact that the pollution control is fragmented, more than to governance, to the institutional framework, is the fact that the pollution control is fragmented across multiple agencies, which sometimes do not coordinate, as we have said before, and this can result in leaving harmful discharges unregulated or overlooked. And an example is the case of the Azraq Oasis, where there was pollution, overextraction, which led to severe ecological degradation. So basically, without a legal recognition or an enforcement of the environmental, the water needs, without a consistent pollution control, the ecosystem will continue to bear the hidden cost of water overuse. And of course, climate change impact will even intensify this threat. I would move on with another major challenges that we identify, which relates to another policies, which is the water reallocation policy. The water reallocation policy foresees that water is reallocated from the agricultural user towards municipal and industrial user. And at the same time, there is another policy specifically for that, but it also try to incentivize the reuse of treated wastewater for agricultural uses. So this policy might seem quite reasonable for economic reason, but also for other reasons, but its unfolding it starts to unfold because it's a recent policy with little consultation or compensation for the farmers. So here we argue basically that without a participatory planning, without more transparent rules, this reallocation policy risk triggering not only resistance from the farmer, but also harm to rural livelihood. And the other concern that you can see in this slide is relating to flood risk. So we couldn't identify a dedicated policy for flood risk management. It was mostly a measure. It was within the strategy, the framework. There were measures that guide the response to flood event, which means that which already say something about the fact that the Jordan governance system is not yet ready to respond proactively. First, responsibility for flood response are spread across multiple agencies, which don't have a legal mandate specific for flood risk management. But also another point which is very important to highlight is that local preparedness remain very limited with when I say local, I mean municipality. They are the one facing flash floods, and they have limited equipment, unclear mandate again, and also almost no dedicated budget. And as an anecdote, we have seen that the community, the population sometimes had to resort to using their own means to resist or to respond to a flooding. So this fragmented approach leaves community very vulnerable despite the increasing threat that floods represent for the country. And so to address these deeply rooted governance challenges, we thought about a set of strategic recommendations which would help better align, let's say, national, local capacity, and I would say ensure also that the water is governed more sustainably and equally. So one of our recommendation is, and you might find it very clearly because it relates to the challenges, relates to the most overlooked aspect of water governance, which is the environment itself. And we believe that to build long-term water resilience, we should formally recognize ecosystems as one of the legitimate water users. This means in practice that we might need to establish enforceable environmental flows, requirement to integrate this flow requirement directly into operational procedure, for instance, and environmental need could be explicitly listed in water allocation plans alongside domestic and other users. At the same time, as a recommendation, we think that future recharge basin dams, floodwater harvesting should only proceed when it's clear that downstream ecosystem will not be harmed. So this is, again, this is not just about protecting nature, but also safeguarding the very hydrological system that all the other users depend on. That's why we think it's important. Another critical pillar of water governance, not just for Jordan, but everywhere, is equity, which means ensuring that water access is not determined by power, by privilege. This is not only a matter of social justice, but also sustainability, as I've explained before, because privileged users often extract more than their fair share and contributing to the overuse and the depletion of the water reserve and destroying the ecosystem. So to address this, we give a couple of ideas, of course. But one is to strengthen the legal safeguard to guarantee impartial or at least equal enforcement across all the groups. Also, transparency in this case could be essential because we could, for instance, foresee an independent oversight bodies, and or another useful tool could be the establishment of a grievance and appeal mechanism. This would enable community to hold institution accountable and to expose the injustice or irregularities. Also, financial instrument could play a role for like for instance progressive tariff that I think they are already there, but also I'm talking about fines for over extraction, targeted water taxes for those who overconsume and abuse of water. But again, legal reform or technical reform alone won't fix the system. We must also invest in advocacy, public outreach to surface hidden inequities, amplify the voices of those excluded, ensuring that governance reflects the reality of this that are faced by the community on the ground. The other suggestion that we see in the next slide is to let's say that that relates to bring power to empower municipality community, because this example, the example of Jordan, shows that to make water governance truly responsive, it's important to shift more power and resources close to those who needs them. So we give the example of floods response and other example. We could give other example, but we think that we should think about empowering municipality with more legally defined water function, with the defined budget. We could invest also in their capacity, not just with training, but with also with infrastructure, with equipment, and transferring some for instance, budgeting authority where, of course, the municipality, if and where the municipality is ready. Equally important, I think, is also the empowerment of organizations like the Water User Association and other community-based organizations, because they are frontline actors, as I was saying before. They experience water insecurity daily, and they are often excluded from formal governance processes. Then another example, which is quite related to all the previous suggestion or recommendation, is that it relates to public trust. So how do we build trust? Is through transparency, through communication, through real participation, not just on paper. And to do this, maybe we could ensure that the policy, the allocation decision, all the data related to enforcement, they are publicly available. They are written in an accessible language or format, so that everyone, not just the policymaker, can understand them, or the expert. We could, I think, another suggestion relates to engage the public early, or all the actors early when we draft strategy, when we draft policy or reform. This should be shared in advance for consultation. And third, we think that we should not discount public awareness campaign, because some key reform, to explain some key reform, but also to dispel some myth and showcase some good stories, some success stories. So also, and we mentioned this in the previous recommendation, is that citizens must have easy way to raise concern, to challenge something that is felt unfair, unsustainable, to provide feedback, to inform future policy. Our next recommendation relates with a specific policy, which is the reallocation policy, because we think it's one of the most politically sensitive within the whole strategy. Well, everything is politically sensitive, but this in particular because, as I was saying, wanted to shift water from agriculture to domestic and industrial use. This must be necessary, could be necessary, but it must be done fairly. Okay, so we recommend, to do so, we recommend, first of all, a phased approach and participatory, of course. So the phased approach would have specific milestone, either set at basin or district level, and this could help gradually manage trade-off, but also gradually build consensus. And the reallocation should not be a one-size-fits all, but should be differentiated based on the local context. And last, the government should consider safety nets, such as target subsidy, transitional support, especially for vulnerable farmers. Next, the other suggestion relates to groundwater, which is the lifeline and one of the most vulnerable and poorly regulated resources. So to protect these resources, we recommend introducing some sunset clauses, some volume-based caps on the legacy well licenses, those related to historical rights. And this permit should also be subject to review, not treated as permanent entitlement. And second, where appropriate, we should legalize informal practice to bring user into these formal systems. And it's not easy, but some enforcement should be digital and local, which means to establish real monitoring system, including smart meter, telemetry, etc. And last, related to flooding, because it's an increasing, is a growing risk in Jordan. The next slide. And this means that to address this risk, we need to start with clarity in leadership. We suggest a single lead agency that is legally designated to coordinate flood preparedness, flood response, but also of course, establish also clear operating procedure across all the relevant actors. Also, we must shift from a reactive approach and to a preventive one, which means not just updating flood maps, but also working together with community to co-design adaptation plan. And for instance, we could systematize flood prevention and include standardized drainage maintenance, scaling up nature-based solution like reforestation, soil retention. This would benefit and reduce the risk of flooding. And again, considering municipality as the frontline actor is also crucial because they are the one that face flood risk and need to act quickly. So I think I will stop here with the hope that this presentation not only conveyed the urgency and the weight of the challenge, but also illuminated clear actionable pathway towards maybe a more sustainable, equitable water future for Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. So now we have the Q&A session. So if anyone has a question, please raise it, as I said before, in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and the speakers will address the questions. I see someone raising their hand, so just a second, we'll open the mic.
But we do highly encourage anyone who has any question to write it down in the chat box. But should you have any, let's say, additions or discussions that you'd like to speak, we'll also allow that. It just takes a little bit longer, that's why.
Khulud, you can speak now if you open your mic.
There is a question in the chat.
I can start with this and then I'll hand it over to Yasmin or Elisa if they have anything else. So Lucienne has asked about governance. How was the research, such as the methodology and results, shared and discussed with authorities? That's a very important question. So maybe first off, I'll start by saying that this policy analysis was done in close partnership and coordination with the Ministry of Water and Irrigation. So they were a partner with us throughout the whole process between when we first inceptualized the study. So we shared the methodology, the approach, and also they were included within the key informant interviews. We also had shared the preliminary results with them during a validation workshop in which we invited multiple stakeholders and experts and representatives from different ministries as well, and relevant authorities, in which they gave their feedback and technical expertise on both the findings and the recommendations. We then proceeded to edit and kind of fine-tune the results and the report based on their feedback. We then shared a draft again with the Ministry of Water and Irrigation to get their buy-in and okay, basically, on the report itself. A lot of back and forth, but basically it's fully, it was done in full collaboration with them. As next steps, and apart from the validation workshop, we plan on leveraging a lot of the evidence as to kind of substantiate influencing and advocacy points that we will be voicing throughout the life of the Tabeaa project. And that's basically, for starters, how we have done it and plan to proceed with it. Yeah, that's it. Do we have any other questions?
Khulud, if you wish to speak, you can open the microphone. It's enabled now. Actually, she asked her question in chat. How will you introduce these suggestions for the water sector regarding flood prevention? Sorry.
Maybe I take this one. So to introduce them to the water sector, basically what I think, that's my opinion, is to share these findings and to collectively, to show basically what's the current situation, because there are municipalities, there are communities that respond to floods by themselves, and despite using bags or all the equipment they find with all the possible material. So I would raise awareness about these issues, and I would probably start with a workshop to understand the issues and to find some and to highlight how crucial it is to support, because sometimes prevention is not sexy, but the point is that acting now in flood prevention might save a lot of costs, might improve economic opportunity, and have a lot of returns. So you might spend one, let's say, dollars today, but you will gain $10 from now to till the next 5 years. So the government has to consider that, and together with all the actors, we need to find a way to find the best policy, but not just policy, also operational solution to support the municipality in the short term. Yeah, I don't know if I addressed your question, Khulud.
Lucian, you would like to speak?
Yes, if I can use the mic, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation and the discussion. That's very interesting, and I think Switzerland is really happy to support your initiative on this topic. I have a long question. That's what I ask to have the mic. And I'm not sure there is a clear answer to that, but I would like just to open the discussion on that. We have currently the national conveyor project, Aqaba Aman. The whole project might cost about, we don't know exactly, but between 4, 5, 6 billion US dollars. That's a lot of money for a very centralized system, which is probably something which is needed for Jordan. I think everyone, I don't know if everyone agrees on that, but it is clear that we need additional resources in Jordan. And I would like to compare this, if we had this amount of money for other solutions, nature-based solution, for instance, how much you think this could be efficient? Could it solve the water issue in Jordan? Could it also contribute to reduce flood mapping, let's say? You also mentioned before, Elisa, that we should keep in mind that we should not use every drop of water in Jordan. We should leave a bit of water for the ecosystem, which I think is very important. So is there, like, if we try to dream a bit for 5 minutes, and let's imagine we had $6 billion to do nature-based solutions, because now everyone is trying to sell nature-based solutions.
Yeah.
Is it something realistic? Is it something feasible? Or do we have evidence for that? Or are we lacking evidence?
Yeah, very good point. Thanks, Lucien. And nice to to hear you again. I think that's what I will start with what you say about the project that is being funded. And for me, increasing supply is always, I understand the needs, but increasing supply is always not the first solution I will look at, because of the supply-demand cycle, basically, that increasing supply will inevitably increase additional demand. So either a dam or a rainwater harvesting system, basically, first, the user will feel less vulnerable, and the availability of water will also lead to an increase of production activity, economic activity, and uses. So there is that long-term consequences to take into account. So for me, when we increase the supply, we must also account for an increase in the demand. Will there be additional sources to tackle that increasing demand? I heard that there is a desalination idea, but again, for me, desalination is just another supply, another increased supply. So I would prefer a nature-based revolution, if we might call it, rather than an increased supply, because it reshifts or it changes the way we use water, okay? To the point where you ask, will a nature-based solution solve the Jordanian crisis? I'm not sure, because it depends on the intent and on if I think about agriculture, on the productivity behind that. So I think that this regenerative agriculture or other nature-based solution are more able to provide the water needed to the ecosystem or to the soil to regenerate itself. But probably what we should ask ourselves more than is what is the root causes of all this crisis? Is it just that water in Jordan is scarce? Is it just that we don't use the right technology? Or is that we are trying to produce something in the wrong place? Or we are trying to overstretch a system that is unable to do that. So it's a very complex political economic issue behind that reshape what we think, our choices. And so long story short, I would prefer a natural-based solution, but not as a technological one, but as a new way of as a rejuvenating way of producing and of using the land and the water resources. Yeah, that's my answer. I don't know if it.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And maybe a follow-up question: how much this discussion is with actors in Jordan?
I don't think that there is that discussion, you know. I believe that they are pushing for a desalination system. We are investing in additional, and even the policy we were mentioning now about water reallocation of water, this is driven by economic reason or economic driver. So I believe that what the approach now is more, we need to find the resources to continue our development and growth, and more than how do we sustainably take care of our resources, or while at the same time but the problem of I mean, from a growth perspective, we cannot stop Jordan to growth. Jordan has all the right to grow and develop itself and have but there needs to be an understanding of the cost that this growth entails. Yeah, and I would. That's what we meant in the recommendation of awareness, raising awareness and communicating, because it's important to know that more supply brings more demand, and I don't know how feasible it is to use all the water from the sea and to pollute it because of desalination. Yeah. Seems so negative, but
Okay, Luciana, unless you have any other follow-up questions, we can move on to the next.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. We have a question from Jeremy. Could you speak a bit more about the recommendations to unpack and streamline overlapping roles and responsibilities between departments and ministries at the local level? So how does MOLA play a role in financing some of these recommendations? So I think with regards to one of the key recommendations is to really understand the overlapping role between the ministries and local departments by establishing clear operational pathways to really understanding who leads on prevention, preparedness, and response. I think this question maybe kind of hits the nail on its head in that it's one of the core issues in Jordan, and maybe to some extent one of the most reoccurrent recommendations whenever we conduct any policy analysis, because of the different, the lack of coordination, and perhaps there are a lot of efforts on the ground with creating different task forces, partnerships, and groups. But what we've been trying to do throughout the Tabeaa project is kind of act, and what we plan to do in the future also is to kind of really empower these different organizations to take on these roles. So for example, typically NCSCM, so the National Center for Security and Crisis Management, is formally mandated to lead on floods at the national level. And then municipalities such as the Ministry of Water, the YAJ, and the Civil Defense each carry out parts of the responsibility on the ground when the actual flood occurs. So with regards to this recommendation, we're talking about developing standardized guidance that really clarifies these shared mandates and where each entity is supposed to step in. So especially with regards to municipal drainage, maintenance, local flood risk planning, and coordination during extreme weather. The role of the Ministry of Local Administration enables and sees and oversees the role of different municipalities. So what they do is that they approve their local development plans and can guide them to adopt these standardized processes. Recommendation actions such as updating drainage plans and improving maintenance regimes and establishing local early action protocols or investing in small-scale flood prevention works requires MOLA's endorsement and support and enforcement to be able to ensure that the municipalities are actually implementing these mandates. To some extent, through our work with and our partnership with MOLA, we have taken the preliminary steps of really getting their endorsement on helping us develop DRM units and DRM plans at the municipal level to support planning with regards to floodwater, as opposed to having it be more reactive with regards to that front. So through their endorsement and our partnership with them, we're hoping to operationalize these actions and align them in a better way with the flood management mandate. With regards to financing, budgets typically for municipalities are assigned through MOLA. At this point, we are unable to work and/or influence a lot of these things, but we're hoping through their endorsement and buy-in, we'll be able to really institutionalize at MOLA's level and throughout the municipalities this planning approach to flood preparedness. I'll leave it to Lisa or anyone else who has any other additions.
I think your answers have been quite extensive, and I have nothing to add. Thanks, Noor.
So if there are no further questions, maybe does anyone have any question? If there are no further questions, we can continue or basically wrap up the webinar.
Yeah.
Okay. So this brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We will be sharing the recording with you after the webinar. Support policymakers and development actors in responding to the challenges highlighted today. Mercy Corps has published a water policy brief that offers practical evidence-based recommendations to strengthen climate adaptation and disaster resilience in Jordan. The brief aims to inform national and local decision makers providing actionable guidance and for government entities, international agencies, donors, and NGOs working to enhance resilience across the kingdom. The policy brief is now available in both Arabic and English, and you can download it directly using the QR code on the screen, and I will share a link in the chat. We will also encourage you to stay connected with us through the social media channels for updates on our ongoing work. Thank you again for all your participation and your questions and engagement. We look forward to continued collaboration and ongoing dialogue as we collectively work towards a more water secure and climate resilient Jordan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.